Hello and welcome to Three Questions with. Got my buddy Chris Dunn with us from BlueHive Exhibits. Good afternoon, Chris. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, I'm great, Kevin. How are you?
I'm just living the dream. I saw a post the other day and it talked about modular trade show exhibits.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I'm going to call Chris and ask him to come on the show.
Well, let's see. I've got 20 something years in the business. I know a thing or two about trade show exhibits and modular stuff as well. You know, just by chance, I happen to have some pictures to share with you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take over the screen here and I'm going to share just a little bit of a piece here that I've got put together.
Cool.
Yeah. So what modular is, and it probably means a few different things to different people, but how we look at it from the industry side is I'm going to be able to build something, a larger exhibit per se, and then I can pull parts and pieces from that and make smaller exhibits. So in this example here for our great clients, they call themselves Veterinary Emergency Group. They built this large black tower right here. So this is a 20 by 30 space, and this tower is ultimately made up of a bunch of metal frame system panels. And I can take those apart and almost use them like Legos. We can build all sorts of different things. So in this particular application, this larger structure broke down and allowed us to make this 10 by 20 exhibit that we see upper right, and then below that, this 10 by 10 exhibit. So with the purchase of that original investment worth of assets of stuff, panels, frames, I can build all sorts of different things. And granted, I've got to produce fabric covers to go over them. But that original investment allows the exhibitor to really leverage that initial purchase and make it work for them through a whole bunch of different show sizes, which is pretty cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of people want some version of that. So page 2 here, this is a little bit different look here. So this is another client of ours, Red Zone Software, recently merged with a company called QAD. Given the name Red Zone, right, they lean into the idea that the red zone in the NFL or in a football sense is that last 20 yards, right before you get a touchdown. That's the hardest sledding to do. So they solve that process by providing a platform that is really easily engageable with frontline workers. So anyway, so they're talking to kind of an industrial, usually plant owners and so forth. Those guys are the ones who are primarily using their software. So they kind of roll in with a little bit of an industrial flavor, and you marry that to the idea of red zone. So in this particular case, on the right-hand side, this was a much bigger booth. It was actually a 20 by 100. You can't see half of it because it's so long and skinny. But this large structure in the center was again made up with kind of a frame system set that allowed us to reposition or utilize those pieces in a bunch of different ways. Upper left, we see the booth in a 20 by 20 version, right? So a bunch of those parts and pieces that make up the bigger booth go into the smaller booth. And then below that, we can see, although this is a rendering, we've done both 10 by 20s and this 10 by 30, again, repositioning those panels in such a way that they kind of create different shapes. We bring in, the same monitors and the same cabinets and so forth. We're able to kind of recreate booths that fit different spaces and just make their program more flexible. Lastly, this is a kind of a similar example, but also another client of ours, LastPass. These guys are basically in the password protection game. This was at a security show here, the larger version of it, which is a 20 by 20. And just a little side note right here, if you're near a column in an exhibit hall, more often than not, they'll give you the option to be able to brand that column, for a lot your money. However, in this particular case, instead of having a big ugly yellow column there, they covered it with a big graphic, and you leverage your experience a little bit outside the booth, which is kind of neat. But upper right hand side, a 10 by 10 booth exhibit using those same frame systems, and then below a 10 by 20. The guy with the Oculus on. This is actually a large video wall that's built right into the booth there. So you can do a lot of different things with it. in all of three of these instances, they all actually were different frame systems, but at the end of the day, they end up having a pretty similar look and feel as how they finish up. And lastly, that I wanted to just show you was, this is a little bit of a different example. It's modular kind of in a different sense. So Devo, also in the kind of internet security realm with us, not specifically my client, but a great client of BlueHive. They've got representation across really kind of the three different pillars of our business. So on the right-hand side, you see a large double-deck exhibit. Upper left, that is a stage back wall for a big corporate event that they had done. And then below, it's actually part of their lobby space. So we do permanent installations as well. And when you think about modularity through that, it's possible to sometimes design a branded asset that might be something that lives within your trade show program, but has the legs and has the possibility to bring it into those other kind of marketing efforts that you're doing. So whether it's a corporate event, or maybe it lives part-time in your lobby and it kind of creates this cool, display. Because if you've got something pretty interesting that you've sunk a bunch of money into, like the more times that you use that, the lower, your dollar cost averaging comes out. So leverage the heck out of it, right? Repurpose those pieces and get as much benefit as possible from, having all of that.
Now, Chris, is the stairs part of the exhibit, or did they know they're going to be at the stairs?
Yeah. In this particular layout right here, the stairs are part of an exhibit. So this deck that's up here is a whole separate level that's part of that booth. So and actually behind there you can see another double deck. So yeah, it's a different level of designing and exhibiting. It adds some cost, but it buys you a whole separate space to have meetings or to do demos. And so yeah, pretty cool stuff.
So, because like you said, you doubled your space. If you only have a space on the floor, if you go up, obviously it's more space to be able to do more stuff with, right?
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So it adds a lot more cost on that end, but for the right client and the right opportunity, adding that double deck is a great option, because like you said, you get to really kind of double your surface area.
Now, Chris, I didn't know what this was up until now and stuff, but to me, it makes a lot of sense, because I've just seen bad experiences where someone has a trade booth and they go to a show and the booth's too big. You don't have that much space. Like, well, we need this because this is our booth. So that you can, like, hey, I know how much space I have. I can bring whichever modules work, right?
Yeah, it's really, you can kind of tear it down to the studs, as it were, and kind of rebuild it each time out. I mean, it does take some thought. You can't do it, on the show floor and be like, oh, I showed up thinking I was going to do a 20-foot booth and now I'm going to do a 15-footer, because you have to have graphics that fit those pieces specifically. So it takes some thought, but yeah, when you invest in basically buying a bunch of Legos, or, whatever term we may be talking about, and work with those pieces as a modular element, it gives you a ton of flexibility to do all sorts of stuff going forward.
But I could also buy and add new pieces as I go.
You certainly could. Absolutely. So a lot of times we'll build the biggest piece that you might have, and then we'll factor smaller exhibits from that, but you can absolutely go the other way around. And that's actually a great way to kind of look at it if you're, maybe a startup or a growing company. Hey, listen, we're only doing, 10 by 20 booths this year, but next year we're really thinking we're going to jump up probably to an island, maybe a 20 by 20, right? We're going to double our space. Now we can go high once we hit that island space. So if you add those initial building blocks and then say, you know what, I'm going to add the same kind of system to that, then that allows you to grow without scrapping everything you did before, and basically just kind of piggyback on that original investment, which again always helps the bottom line. We can reuse that stuff.
Definitely makes sense. Chris, one of my many problems in life is I have no visualization skills at all. I just don't. Like, when I see that, I'm like, oh man, I like that. But if you ask me, Kev, what's your vision? I don't got one. So can you help someone who's like me, who knows they want something cool, they can see the pitch, go, yeah, like that, kind of bring my idea to a concept that I'm not aware of yet?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're not alone in that world, Kevin. You know, in the exhibit industry, you kind of learn to think in three dimensions, and I see exhibits in my head, which sometimes is like a nightmare. It's a blessing and a curse. But a lot of times when we're sitting down with folks, when we do that discovery, it's not so much right off the bat of like, yeah, how many demo stations and what do you need for a closet? We start more kind of on a high level marketing, big picture goals. What are we trying to get out of the show? Do you have campaigns that you're using? So we're going to talk to you not so much about the nuts and bolts, but we're going to talk to you about kind of your overall vision for your marketing effort, your position in the marketplace. What's your message? Who do you talk to? What are we trying to say and what are we trying to accomplish? But then again, if we're working with somebody like yourself who needs a little bit of visual help, we've got a portfolio and we've got all of these other images like I had shown where we can roll these out and be like, okay, let's do a little bit of a deep dive. Here is, a 10 by 20 with a couple of demo stations. Does this look and feel fit? Does the space work? Our demos are really noisy. They shouldn't be next to each other, right? So let's create architecture that actually separates them so that the noise doesn't, overpower each other.
Wow.
When you get into the island spaces, the larger spaces, and you have more room, you're sometimes talking about, hey, we're going to do a little theater here. We want to do a meeting room. We want to do a soft seating area. We want to have a game or an experience in this zone right here. And then I still want to have room for, a couple of demos and a reception desk and being able to show either past work or other designs that exist. It just makes it that much easier for you to basically, look and say, I like that, or I don't like that. That doesn't really work for me. So there's a lot of tools that we can employ, and more often than not, when we get in those conversations, we also are working with a 3D designer on our team, and they're involved in that conversation. So sometimes literally they'll start sketching things out. They'll be like, hey, what do you think of this? I sketched out a floor plan, or excuse me, or, we did another project recently. They had a lot of the same needs that you do. Here's kind of what we did for them. What do you think of that as a jumping off point?
Great. So Chris, what's the best way for people to reach out to you that'd like to learn more?
A couple different ways. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. And also my email address is cdunn@blue-hive.com. So BLUE-HIVE.com. Check out our website, email me directly, go through my LinkedIn, whatever it takes. I'm happy to talk.
Chris, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to come on the show. And as always, thanks for being my friend.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I appreciate it.